At this point in time, there are a number of regulatory reforms and changes being proposed and or implemented within the financial services industry in Australia. I'm here with Dante De Gori, the Chief Executive Officer of the Financial Planning Association of Australia, or FPA. Today we're going to talk about some of those regulatory issues and also flag some upcoming items and events. Dante, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So first of all, I wanted to touch on your speech from the FPA National Roadshow last week. You talked about needing to strike a balance between being able to support innovation but also not provide exemptions for financial technology providers. Can you elaborate a bit on this? How best can we strike this balance but also be able to support that innovation?
Yeah, great. It's a really interesting point and a very topical issue in the industry at the moment, which is, of course, this technology that's coming into play. Robo advice has been termed, and it's a term that I don't think is appropriate considering the technology, but nevertheless, that's what's been coined, robo advice. I think it's really important to remember that at whatever the technology or the medium, that Australians, when they get personal financial advice, their protections, the obligations on the provider should be the same. It's very important that at the end of the day, irrespective of the medium, you're delivering personal advice to an Australian consumer. So it's a very important point. And so therefore, if the industry itself doesn't support innovation in that it's red tape or the licensing regime is not appropriate in facilitating new entrants or facilitating investment from fintechs, then there's a question that should be asked about whether or not there's a problem with the licensing regime. Because I think if you ask everyone in the marketplace, if they were able to get exemptions from their licensing obligations or to enter the marketplace, they'd all put their hand up. So why have those measures in place purely because of technology reasons? And I think that's a question that we're asking, and I think it's really important that it's clear that what we're coming from here is a level playing field perspective, in that we believe that if you're going to enter the marketplace and provide personal financial advice to Australian consumers, that the requirements are the same, your obligations are the same, and the protections afforded to consumers are the same. They shouldn't be worse off as a result of operating with one provider over another because of technology.
Yeah. Okay.
It's very important. But I just want to make the other point. This doesn't mean that we oppose technology or innovation, okay? And that's a very important point too, because technology is going to be the enabler for financial advice to more Australians in the future, without a doubt. It's going to change the way advice is provided going forward, so the technology is very important. And so we have no concerns about technology. In fact, we welcome new technology into the profession. But I just think we have to be very careful about how we treat that technology for the purposes of the licensing regime.
Okay. Now speaking of that change, there's obviously a lot happening in the fintech sphere at this point in time. Are there any particular innovative products or services that you or the FPA can identify that will be able to drastically change the industry in the coming years, either for better or for worse?
Well, I think what's interesting is that technology is changing a lot, and it's rapidly changing, and so it's hard to say what is going to be available tomorrow that will be of more benefit. I think what we're seeing today is the ability to automate a number of functions that will support the advice process. And I think that's where the key is. So a financial planner's value, if you like, and their true offering that they can provide a consumer is the connection with the consumer, understanding their personal situation, and being able to relate to them on a very lifelike level, human level, and understanding their situation that's different to another person's situation, and to be able to provide that, not only just the advice, but the support. And the ongoing support so that the advice can be delivered and the plan can be implemented. Technology will enable that, because a lot of time and effort in terms of gathering of information, for example, being able to digitalise that and being able to be more efficient in getting the information you need from the client in terms of their financial situation can be better improved and can reduce the time that a plan needs to spend on that. Also, in terms of once a strategy has been developed, and a plan's been agreed on. Some of the selection options, these tools obviously can help in terms of, so if we are going to go down the track of recommending some new financial products, well, potentially these tools can help support in the selection of those. So I believe they can aid in the advice process. They won't replace the advice process, but they definitely can aid to make the advice process more efficient and more effective. And of course, those tools can also be used to help target potential clients that are currently not advice clients as well, that are looking to engage with their finances but aren't yet ready to take the step to see a professional.
Okay. Now, the FPA has spoken numerous times about the proposed Royal Commission that's being talked about in the media. Obviously, we have the LIF reforms to come before Parliament again. What are the other legislative challenges that you see are currently facing the industry as we move toward the future?
Well, the biggest change that's going to come from a regulatory reform perspective is a professional standards and education reform agenda. It is the number one. It will fundamentally change the framework for which one becomes a financial planner going forward. It is very important that this is well understood by the industry at large. It is also well understood by the existing financial planners and also for the next generation that employers will be looking to bring into the profession, because the process in which one becomes now accredited and licensed and authorised to give personal financial advice to a consumer is going to change and dramatically change and become a lot more tougher to do, and for good reason. Providing financial advice to everyday mum and dads and everyday Australians and giving them advice about their financial futures is very, very important, okay? And it can make a significant difference to their lives and can be quite devastating if it's done wrong. Okay, so you want the persons to be appropriately qualified, and I think as a profession, it's important that the minimum standard is of a degree qualification. That's very important. But the degree or the education itself is not the start and end of this whole process. The framework is going to fundamentally change the way one enters, and they need to basically complete 4 separate measures in order before they can actually be deemed a financial planner and actually practice as a financial planner. So degree qualification is one. They also need to complete a professional year. So there'll be a set criteria that everyone need to complete, irrespective of where they might work, a professional year program. They'll be required to pass and sit and pass a registration exam. And they'll also need to sign up to an approved code of ethics. So for the first time, every financial planner in this country will be subject to an actual code of ethics. Obviously, FPA members have voluntarily signed up to a code of ethics, but there are many planners who choose not to be members and therefore are actually operating without any code of ethics obligations. And I think that's an indictment on the profession, so this will change that. And only then, once you've ticked those 4 requirements, you then are actually eligible to be on the ASIC register, identify yourself as a financial planner to a consumer, and provide personal financial advice.
Yeah. So with all of the discussion of regulatory reform going on at the moment, including the new professional standards framework that you just spoke about, it might be possible that some other changes within the industry have had to take a back seat. What are the kinds of changes that at this point in time you would like to see happen in the industry that perhaps we haven't had the time to discuss in recent memory?
Well, I mean, look, there's been a whole host of reform over the last 5 or 6 years. The future financial advice reforms in particular were a massive piece of reform because it structurally changed the way the industry operated, business models and remuneration arrangements. So that was fundamental, and we're only seeing the beginning ends of that in terms of its change and implementation. So there's a lot more to go there, and I think it's important that we try and settle as well. The FPA is definitely not pushing for more reform to the industry in that respect, because you need to give time for it to settle. The life insurance framework will be another impact on the industry because of the structural changes it will have on business models and remuneration. So again, that also will take some time. I mean, that's still to be legislated, and there's a transition process for that as well over the next 3 years. So it's very important that that is considered and bedded down. In terms of other reforms, I mean, the FPA is obviously very proactive in terms of wanting to have greater accessibility and affordability of advice, and the FPA continues to push measures around tax deductibility or rebate for financial advice fees, and I think that's something that we'll continue to push, and of course that is going to be an item that the government is going to need to consider based on their own budget position. But nevertheless, it's one the FPA will continue to push for, because out of all these reforms, one of the key factors that need to translate is more consumers gaining access to advice. And affordability is a big issue that needs to be considered. And one thing, of course, is that all the reform and legislative changes have increased costs because of the expense to industry to implement. But of course, ultimately what you want to do is you want to have access, and affordability is a key part of that access. And so the FPA will be working very hard in that respect.
Yeah. Okay, so with those increasing costs that you talked about and other such issues that come from having these reforms, how can financial service providers, planners and advisors ensure that they're still delivering quality advice to their clients, and also then being able to attract new clients, in light of all of these changes that are happening?
Sure. Well, look, I mean, the reform agenda with FOFA and the education professional standards have actually, and also I'll throw into the mix there, we've also been through the requirement for financial advisors to be registered at the Tax Practitioners Board as registered tax financial advisors. So all those elements have actually will do their role in improving quality of advice, proper quality education, proper quality framework in terms of the FOFA model, in terms of removing conflicts, best interest duty obligations, and of course there's a lot more emphasis around quality advice in terms of compliance and auditing of that advice. And I think that professional training will help and will improve quality of advice. In that respect, there's a lot that's already been done, and those financial planners that continue to remain in the profession going forward after all this change are very serious about what they do and to deliver quality advice to consumers. If we want more Australians to access advice, they need to trust that the advice is of quality and is of highest standard that can be, and obviously reflects their interests in terms of the consumer interest. And I think the profession is going a long way to actually implement that type of reflection on society, in terms of we're very serious about the advice we want to provide, we're adhering to these requirements, the law's very strong, that we're very heavily regulated, and obviously now we're appropriately qualified and trained to provide the advice. So consumers can feel a greater sense of trust and certainty that those remaining in the profession, those in the profession, are very serious about what they do and are there to provide quality advice. I think it's important. And of course there's a role for the Financial Planning Association along with the regulator ASIC to help oversee that.
Now the FPA Congress is coming up towards the end of this year. What can you tell us about this event?
So the FPA National Congress will be hosted in Perth for the first time, I think, in 20 years. It'll run between the 23rd, the 25th of November. The theme for this Congress is Future Ready. So obviously it's very important, as we've been discussing around all the regulatory changes and changes in financial planning, that we support members in terms of being ready for what's happening next, and so appropriately themed Future Ready. We have 15 CPD points on offer, and for the first time we're going to have 3 CPD points dedicated towards ethics. Very high concentration of ethics content at the Congress this year, which we're very proud of, and we think it's a great opportunity in terms of professional development for members to gain their ethics points as part of their CPD obligations.
Okay, great. And finally, the entries for the 2016 FPA Awards have just opened. Is there anything in particular we can be looking out for with this year's awards?
Yes, this year's awards, we have 6 awards this year. We have 2 brand new awards that we've added to the mix, and they include a Paraplanner of the Year award. This is to recognise, of course, the next generation of potential financial planners and the role that paraplanners play in supporting financial planners and advice to consumers. And of course, our final award that we're introducing this year is the FPA Professional Practice Award. So under the FPA banner, we have what we call FPA professional practices who have met a set stringent criteria to be eligible to become and name themselves as FPA professional practices, and we'll be looking to recognise the best practice of the year this year. So very excited. Awards are open now, so if you're interested in nominating someone for an award, entrants are open now at fpa.com.au/awards. I think they close in early September.
Okay, fantastic. Dante, thank you very much for joining us.
You're welcome, thank you.